Hello everyone, it's Coach Dave here, and in today's episode I'm going to teach you the fundamentals of driving in Assetto Corsa Competizione. In this game we're driving GT3 cars, and I want to teach you how to maximize them using my experience from the real world and the simulator. Keep in mind that a GT3 car has ABS and traction control. These are two advantages of a GT3 car which make it very fast around a racetrack. It's the strongest points of the car itself. Using these features we can maximize the performance of the lap time by making the most of braking and accelerating. However, keep in mind that these cars are actually relatively heavy for racing cars. So we need to shorten the cornering phase and maximize the braking and accelerating phases. However, before we can get there, we need to think about the building blocks of driving. And the building blocks that I teach are the same principles that I use in the simulator and in real life. The first rule of my three most important rules is the easiest one to remember, and that is to look far ahead. Many people think that racing drivers have incredibly fast reaction times, and this is true. However, for the most part, we're actually better at anticipating what's coming next. And the most simple reason for this is that we are looking far ahead. But what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for reference points, which is rule number 2. And reference points are clearly marked as static objects around the racetrack which help us identify what our next movement should be that braking, turning, accelerating, changing gears. Without these reference points, we start to drive off instinct, and naturally our instinct is very inconsistent. So in order to be consistent, in order to understand how to drive fast, we need to have clear and well-defined reference points. The simplest reference points around a racetrack are the brake boards. These are the 300, 400, 200, 50. It depends on the racetrack. Some of them are 1, 2, 3. The point is that these are static objects on the side of the racetrack that help us define where we can start our action. And usually for every corner, that action starts with braking. When you're braking in a GT3 car, as I mentioned earlier, you want to use the ABS to your advantage, which means we can brake first in a straight line, but then into the corner without locking up the brakes. By doing so, we're shortening the entry phase and are able to get to the apex as quick as possible. Then, when we are at the apex, we have to wait until we've crossed the apex point, like this, so that when we start to open the steering, we can start to get on the throttle. Rule number 3 in my building blocks of driving fast is to only get on the power after you've touched or reached the apex. If you get on the power before you've reached the apex, you're asking the car to do too many things. Because prior to the apex, our focus is on steering the car and turning the car. Once we get to the apex, we'll start to open up the steering and therefore give the car the energy and the space to apply throttle as well. If we get on the power before the apex, the rear tires will literally push the car straight, and in many cases this can lead to one or two things. The first one is exit understeer, or in severe cases, generally just spinning the car out. If you find yourself spinning the car on the brakes on entry, be sure to first brake in a straight line. This could also be a cause of going into the corner too fast. One of the lessons I like to teach in the Coach Dave Academy is that we only have control of where we're braking and where we are turning. Everything after that is a consequence of those two inputs. So if we were going to use this racetrack as an example of how to improve as a racing driver, let's first look at turn 1. Turn 1, we're going to brake 20 meters before the 100-meter board. We want to treat the first turn as the entry to turn 2. Get onto the curb for turn 2 and then stay tight for turn 3. On the outside are orange markers for marshal posts. We use those as visual reference points to know when we can get on the power. And then as we approach turn 4, we're going to brake under the bridge and into the apex, shortening the corner and using clear visual reference points for when we're able to brake and turn. Turn 5 is much more complicated. There is no clear visual reference point, so we count down to 0, which is another technique that you can use to understand how to be consistent. So as you approach turn 4, count down from the exit of turn... As we approach turn 5 rather, count down from the exit of turn 4. 3, 2, 1. And this will help you get a very good feeling of how to be consistent for the braking point there. We're now into turn 9. Here you want to just tap the brakes, roll the car into the apex and get on the power, just as you can start to see the exit. Turn 10, this hairpin is very complicated. Our reference point is a tree before the 100-meter board, and we brake it down to first gear and into the apex, waiting until we've gotten through the corner before getting on the power as quickly as we can. cutting turn 11 and then staying close to the apex curve of turn 12, being patient with the power and getting onto the throttle only when we see the exit. Now we approach probably the most technical part of the racetrack, the chicane section. We want to brake early and from the middle of the racetrack in order to avoid big weight transfers. In the Ferrari you can stay in first gear through the whole sequence, but in other cars you may find yourself short shifting between the two corners. In particular with the Ferrari 48 GT3 that I'm driving today, it does not have a lot of torque, it has a lot of power. So we can use every single gear to the maximum in order to get the peak amount of acceleration that we need as we exit each corner. Again, as we go through turn 1, 2 and 3, I want you to consider them not as individual corners but as a sequence that you have to get right in combination. If we try and push our way through turn 1, turn 2 will be difficult and turn 3 will almost be impossible, so we want to avoid that. Whenever you're looking at any corner and you have a problem with it, be it somewhere around the apex or spinning out on the exit, always diagnose what happened at the entry. So start at the exit, see what happened when you exited the corner and work your way backwards from there to try and understand where you can improve on the entry point. It's usually something that happened at entry that caused the issue that you have at the exit. If you stick to these building blocks, you'll start to realize that there's a lot of complexity under each one. The basic rules on the surface seem very simple. Look far ahead, have clear and well-defined reference points, and don't get on the power before the apex. Of course, in some instances we can start to break these rules, but only once we truly understand them and understand their use can we start to really go into detail about which corners we can start to break the rules around. The first rule that you're likely to break, to be honest with you, is getting on the power too early, because we all naturally know when we arrive at a corner too slowly, and our reaction to that is to get on the accelerator to get the speed up. However, I encourage you to start looking at other ways to get the speed into a corner. Either brake a little bit later, or don't release the brake, or don't hold the brake too long. These are quick solutions to help you carry speed into a turn, get to the apex sooner, get the car rotated, and therefore get on the power sooner. If you use these fundamental building blocks, I'm pretty sure that you'll find a quicker rate to improve, and you can use them not just in the simulator but also in real life. So until the next one, I hope you found that useful, and I'll catch you around the next lap. Peace.